Hello and welcome. I'm Asuma Katauka and you are watching News X World. Let's take a look at some of the top stories. Austrian prosecutors have charged a former top diplomat with abuse of authority and breach of confidentiality for allegedly leaking a classified report containing the Novichok formula. The document, requested while he was the foreign minister's highest-ranking civil servant, was linked to the 2018 Novichok poisoning of ex-Russian double agent Sergei Skripal in England. British Prime Minister Keir Starmer's move to end controversy over a collapsed China spying case by releasing witness statements has sparked fresh questions about government transparency and ministerial involvement. This comes amid increased criticism that Starmer's government is prioritizing economic ties with Beijing over national security. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has declared that the fight in Gaza and the wider region is not over yet, vying to secure the return of all hostages held by Hamas. Israel's hostage forum has urged the government to delay the next phases of the truce if Hamas fails to return the bodies of the captives. Now, Israel has returned the bodies of 30 Palestinians to Gaza today, bringing the total to 120 people, according to the Hamas-run Health Ministry and Nasser Hospital. This comes under the ceasefire deal. Israel has agreed to return 15 Palestinian bodies for every deceased Israeli handed over by Hamas. At least 40 civilians were killed in clashes along the Afghanistan-Pakistan border before a truce was reached. According to Afghan health officials, the deadly exchanges erupted amid rising tensions between Kabul and Islamabad over cross-border shelling and security operations. Pope Leo has condemned the world's economy for failing to end hunger during a speech at the UN's Agricultural Agency. Meanwhile, the Vatican's Child Protection Commission has rebuked senior Catholic leaders for moving too slow to aid clergy abuse victims and implement global safeguarding reforms in the 1.4 billion member church. Bangladesh prosecutors have demanded the death penalty for fugitive ex-Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina, accusing her of crimes against humanity over a 2024 crackdown that has killed up to 1,400 people, according to the United Nations. Hasina is being tried in absentia from India as the trial enters its final stages ahead of Bangladesh's February elections. Now we start from the Middle East. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has declared today that Israel remains determined to secure the return of all hostages held by Hamas in Gaza, vowing that the fight is not over yet. Speaking at the state ceremony in Jerusalem, marking the October 7, 2023 Hamas attack that ignited the ongoing war, Netanyahu has emphasized Israel's unwavering resolve to win a victory that will impact the region for years to come. The remarks came a day after Hamas claimed it had handed over all the captives it could access. Netanyahu has reiterated Israel's commitment to achieving the goals it set out for the Gaza war, insisting that the country would prevail. He has also warned Israel's enemies, stating that anyone who harms Israel will face severe consequences. The ceremony held at the Mount Herzl Military Cemetery has honored fallen soldiers who have died over the course of the 2-year conflict with Hamas. Now for this discussion, we are joined by Sasha Machta. She's a political commentator, joins us live from Jerusalem. Thank you very much, Sasha, for joining us. Welcome to News X World. Sasha, can you tell us how fragile is this ceasefire, and do you think that this could hold?
Hi, so first I'd like to thank you for having me on the program and express my deep appreciation to the Indian people. And I think that for now the most important part of this deal has occurred, which is the release of the living hostages. It was the most urgent and necessary move, and we're full of joy that we've seen the images of the 20 hostages, living hostages, reunite with their families. But as we see, we're dealing with brutal jihadist terrorist organization, and everything is fragile. We still have 19 bodies of dead hostages that need to be returned as according to phase 1 of the deal. So we can't move on to phase 2 of the deal until all of the bodies are returned. We're dealing with a group that has no good faith in negotiations, and we depend on pressure being put on Hamas. So I think that the fragility of the deal depends on what pressure we're going to see being put on Hamas by the Arab world and by the United States. So for now, I'm optimistic that this pressure will keep going because it's what led to this deal. And we hope that in the next few days we'll see the remaining bodies of the hostages come home and the proper burials that the families so deeply deserve, because we can't move on, the families can't move on from this horrible, horrific day in Israeli history without all of the hostages home. We're happy that the living hostages are home, but we still need the remaining hostages.
And Sasha, we saw that in the ceremony we just saw earlier in these clips that Prime Minister Netanyahu was in the place where all the fallen soldiers of IDF are rested. Can you tell us what is IDF or Israeli government doing to ensure the psychological safety, the trauma that these IDF soldiers have come back home with after this war?
So there's no lie that Israeli soldiers are facing a lot of PTSD. The whole country is in grief. We had one of the most horrific days in not even Israeli history, but in Jewish history since the Holocaust. It was the largest massacre of Jews since the Holocaust on October 7th, and we are a country that's mourning. But we also understand that we need to fight to live safely here, and we need to fight for our existence. And the soldiers, they have saved this country on October 7th. It's their bravery that came out and saved the kibbutzim, and it's been their hard work and their countless days and dedication to the country that has brought the hostages home as well. But of course, the Israeli government and the IDF needs to take certain steps to ensure that the PTSD that Israeli soldiers may face and the psychological trauma of this 2 years of war will be handled. And there's a lot of investments that will need to be made in this. There's a lot of steps that will need to be taken. But the most important thing is that all of the people in Israel openly embrace all of the soldiers and treat them as heroes. And we know that without them, we would not be here today. So there's a lot to be done, but the healing begins with the return of all the hostages. And we feel that a unique joy that we haven't felt for 2 years. We feel that we can finally move on from October 7th. Because even though the world might have forgotten this day and might have forgotten why we're fighting, we never forgot. The soldiers never forgot, and we always remember. But not only we remember, we try and remove this threat, and we try to live safely, because that's all we want. And now we can heal. There's a time for war, and there's a time for peace, as Trump said in his speech. And we hope that now is the time for peace. We hope that now is the time for healing. And we hope that we can move on from this horrible day in our history.
Thank you, Sasha, for sharing that. Please stay with us as we stay on this topic. Now, the Hamas-run Health Ministry and Nasser Hospital in Khan Yunis has confirmed that Israel has handed over 30 Palestinian bodies to Gaza today. This brings the total number of Palestinian remains returned to 120 people since the ceasefire agreement. Under the deal brokered by U.S. President Donald Trump, Israel was to release 15 Palestinian bodies for every deceased Israeli returned. On Wednesday, 15 October, Hamas has returned 2 more bodies to Israel and stated that it had handed over all remains of captives accessible to them. Now, for this discussion, we go back to Sasha Machta. He's a political commentator, joins us live from Jerusalem. Thank you, Sasha, for staying with us. Sasha, when they say accessible, Hamas has said as a reason for only handling 2 hostage bodies, they said accessible. Can you tell us what could be the reasons behind? Do you think that they have lost the bodies of these hostages during they were in the hide in Gaza during this war?
First of all, there's a slight chance that some of the bodies may be lost and that there will be a need to find them. But Israeli intelligence has confirmed that the number is much higher of hostages' bodies that are in Gaza that Hamas has said. So at the end of the day, we know that there's more hostages. We know also that Hamas wouldn't just lose these bodies, because at the end of the day, what was keeping Hamas alive these 2 years was holding hostages. The hostages are Hamas's key asset, and of course they're not going to lose them so easily. So we know that Hamas is trying to test the limits of this deal. Hamas is trying to see whether each small infraction will be met with consequence, and that's why we need to up the pressure on Hamas. The international community needs to up the pressure on Hamas. Qatar and Turkey need to up the pressure on Hamas, because this deal and the future and success of this deal depends on pressure being put on Hamas. This pressure being put on Hamas is what brought to this deal, and it's what will see the continuation of this deal. So I don't think that Hamas is telling the truth. I think that there are more bodies of hostages that they must get back immediately, and we must all call for Hamas to give up the bodies.
And Sasha, now that we have seen past week, a lot of countries across the world, including a lot of countries from Europe, have announced aid for reconstruction of Gaza. What do you think? What is the role of Europe moving forward in this Gaza and Israel situation?
I think that Europe does have a role to play in the reconstruction of Gaza, but there can be no reconstruction of Gaza without the full disarmament of Hamas and leaving power. This is also part of phase 2 of the deal. And at the end of the day, Trump laid out a plan that will also see the reconstruction of Gaza without Hamas. So there's a role to play. Europe could have a constructive part of it. We also have to take into account the dangerous actions that Europe has been taking prior to this deal. At the end of the day, Europe has helped in prolonging the war. We believe that Europe's unilateral declarations of Palestinian states have not contributed to ending the war, have not contributed to peace in the Middle East. And Europe's going to have to change their attitude to the conflict, because Europe has consistently, I'm speaking about most European countries like France and Spain, have been consistently rewarding Hamas. And we're lucky that Donald Trump was able to convince the Arab world to get on board, because the direction we were heading was Israel's international isolation, led by Europe, led by Canada, led by Australia. And of course, that would have just prolonged the war, because Hamas was getting rewarded for the continuation of this war. And thankfully, we're all grateful for Mr. Donald Trump that was able to put an end to that and stop rewarding Hamas and put all the pressure where it belongs, which is on Hamas through its patrons, through Qatar and Turkey. And Europe's going to have to change their attitude to this region if they want to have a constructive role. But of course, this problem is not only an Israeli problem, it's a regional problem. So we also hope that regional partners will come in and create a better future for the people of Gaza, because we want to live in peace with them. We want to see them thrive. We want to see them have a future where they can really achieve economic prosperity and a better future for their children. And the key of that starts with removing Hamas, de-radicalization and demilitarization. And that's part of the deal, and we need to pressure and call for Hamas to lay down their arms.
With that, I would like to thank Sasha Machta for joining us today and sharing that insight as a political commentator. Thank you. Now we move on and we stay in the region. Palestinians in Khan Yunis are facing the reality of mass displacement following last week's ceasefire between Israel and Hamas, with many residents struggling to rebuild their lives. Displaced residents described the aftermath as a continuation of suffering, with humanitarian conditions in Gaza deteriorating due to widespread homelessness, food insecurity, and overburdened health facilities. Israel has warned that the Rafah crossing could remain closed, limiting aid to the enclave, citing delays by Hamas in returning the bodies of the deceased hostages. Kogad, Israel's military body overseeing aid flows into Gaza, has said that humanitarian aid continued to enter via the Kerem Shalom crossing and other points, but not through Rafah, which was never agreed for aid passage. Let's listen into what a few locals have said.
من بعد اللي سمعناه امبارح التهديدات اللي بتصير ووقف اطلاق النار خايفين ينهار في اي لحظه، لانه امبارح بقول لك يعني الحكومه الاسرائيليه ترجع للحرب ثاني في غزه. الناس لما سمعت الكلام هذا انقطع حيلها، يعني ما بضل فيها حيل.
من اول ما فتحت المعبر انبسطنا وصرنا نسقف ونهلل ونقول يا ناس ها وقفت الحرب وانبسطنا الصحيه، لكن ثاني يوم الحرب يعني ما فيش بوادر ولا دليل انه وقفت الحرب، يعني ما فيش. ايش في واحد مهجر ايش بده يستنى؟ يعني واحد مهجر من لنا الحين سنتين، وايش بدنا سوينا احنا ايش ذنبنا؟ ايش عملنا؟
Now we move on to our next news. Pope Leo has urged global leaders to take urgent action against world hunger, blaming a soulless economy and calling the situation a collective failure and ethical derailment. Speaking at the Food and Agricultural Organization in Rome on its 80th anniversary, the pontiff has condemned the continued use of starvation as a weapon of war and called out the global indifference to millions suffering daily from hunger. Let's listen into what he has said.
En un tiempo en el que la ciencia ha alargado la esperanza de vida, la tecnología ha acercado continentes y el conocimiento ha abierto horizontes antes inimaginables. Permitir que millones de seres humanos vivan y mueran golpeados por el hambre es un fracaso colectivo, un extravío ético, una culpa histórica.
He has highlighted the paradox of food waste alongside mass starvation and called on the world to re-examine lifestyles, priorities, and responsibility towards the most vulnerable. Pope Leo has cited countries including Ukraine, Gaza, Haiti, Afghanistan, Mali, Central African Republic, Yemen, and South Sudan, where poverty and hunger have become daily realities. He has urged the international community to act, reminding that hunger is not humanity's destiny, but its downfall, and stressed that failing to address it represents a historic and moral failure. Now we move on. Syria's President Ahmed al-Shara has met with Russian President Vladimir Putin in Moscow yesterday, 15th October, marking his first state visit since taking office. Ahmed al-Shara has said that he aims to restore and redefine Syria-Russia relations, emphasizing Syria's independence, territorial unity, and security and stability. Now let's listen into what Ahmed al-Shara, the Syrian leader, has said.
كل ما مضى من اتفاقيات ومن هذا التاريخ العظيم، ونحاول أن نعيد ونعرف بشكل جديد طبيعة هذه العلاقات، على أن يكون هناك استقلال للحالة السورية، السيادة السورية، وأيضا سلامة ووحدة أراضيها واستقرار الأمني المرتبط بالاستقرار.
The meeting comes amid Syria's efforts to rebuild after a decade-long civil war. Ahmed al-Shara has reportedly planned to discuss the fate of ousted former leader Bashar al-Assad with Moscow, though the topic was not addressed in his public remarks. President Putin has welcomed Ahmed al-Shara, praising recent Syrian parliamentary elections and calling them a success that strengthens ties between political forces. This is what the Russian president has said.
Между нашими странами за многие десятилетия сложились особые отношения. Свыше 80 лет мы поддерживаем дипломатические связи, причем они были установлены в самые трудные для России, для Советского Союза времена в 1944 году. На это время отношения между Сирией и Россией всегда носили исключительно дружеский характер. В России никогда в отношении Сирии не было никаких каких-то отношений, связанных с нашей политической конъюнктурой или с особыми интересами. Мы всегда руководствовались на протяжении всех этих десятилетий одним – интересами сирийского народа.
Maintaining relations with Russia is crucial for Syria's reconstruction, energy and food supplies, as well as international legitimacy. Now, Moscow continues to maintain military bases on the Syrian coast and has sent oil shipments to support Damascus. Now, for this discussion, we're joined by Dr. Anna Matviva. She's a senior visiting research fellow at King's College London, and Russia Institute joins us live from London. Thank you very much, Doctor, for joining us. Welcome to News 6 World. Now, what do you think, what does President Ahmed al-Shara's visit and his call to redefine Syria-Russia relations signals about the future of Syria and Russia's geopolitical alignment.
I think it's very interesting that both presidents, Putin and al-Shara, they managed to rescue the relationship and trying to rebuild it in very short time. It has been less than a year since the ouster of Bashar al-Assad, and we see already quite major progress in different spheres. For example, now Russia seems to be retaining two military bases, one naval, the other air base in Syria. Russia still has economic interests, economic projects, investment, about 20 billion worth of investment in Syria. Then Russia again became a player in Syria's security. In August, Russian troops returned to patrolling the highway on the border with Turkey, where interests of Syria and Russia coincide is that the Syrian president emphasized territorial integrity. This is the number one question for him, with different external actors vying for pieces of Syrian territory, Israel, Turkey, United States. Russia is not in that game. They are not trying to grab a piece of Syrian territory. So in that sense, it is an ally, because generally they want a restoration of Syrian territorial integrity, and they're prepared to help the new power holders, the new government, on that road.
And Dr. Anna, what do you think, what was like a common ground for them? As you've also mentioned that, it only took them a year to kind of come to where they are now, regardless of the past.
On the Russian side, I have to give kudos to the Russian diplomacy. It geared into action very fast. Russia has quite good resource pool of Syrian kind of Middle East experts. So they have been generated into action very fast. Everybody within Syrian diaspora, everybody who already had some ties with the opposition, not with al-Sharia, but with more moderate forces, they all have been mobilized within days after the power change. So in that sense, we have to say that Russian diplomacy showed itself really at its best, and being very flexible, being quite pragmatic. On the Syrian side, again, al-Shara proved himself to be a pragmatist rather than ideological, fanatical, religious warrior. He really proving himself to be more of a statesman who holds the interests of Syria first and foremost. And Syria does not want to be dragged into an international geopolitical competition. They do not have a dog in that fight. So in that sense, he, from the beginning, maintained quite a distance from great power politics, which really have nothing to do with Syrian problems, and was saying that it is, from quite early on, that it is very easy to break relationships. It's not very easy to win new friends. So before we break with anybody, break any relationship, we have to think, is it good for us or maybe not? And that is where they both, Syria and Russia, Putin and al-Shara, have a meeting of minds. They are both guided by what they think are in their national interests. For Moscow, it's also, of course, a question of prestige. It's not just economic or security interests in Syria. It's also saying that we do have enduring presence in the Middle East. And our relationship with Syria is so deep that it can survive that kind of dramatic change.
Right. Thank you very much, Dr. Anna Matvina, for sharing that insight. All the way from London, please stay with us as we come back to you for our next discussion as well. Now we move on. Britain has targeted Russia's two largest oil companies, Lukoil and Rosneft, and 44 Shadow Fleet tankers in what it described as a new bid to tighten energy sanctions in choke of Kremlin venues. Now, Lukoil and Rosneft were designated under Britain's Russia sanction laws for what London has described as their role in supporting the Russian government. The sanctions state that they are subject to an asset freeze, director disqualification, transport restriction, and a ban on British trust services. The British government says the two companies were considered strategically significant to the Kremlin and their activities were of economic importance to Russia, contributing to state revenues that help to sustain its war with Ukraine. Britain has targeted Russia's two largest oil companies, Lukoil and Rosneft, and 44 Shadow Fleet tankers in what it has described as a new bid to tighten energy sanctions and, in their words, choke off Kremlin revenues. Now, Lukoil and Rosneft were designated under Britain's Russia sanction laws for what London has described as their role in supporting the Russian government. The sanctions state that they are subject to an asset freeze, director disqualification, transport restriction, as well as a ban on British trust services. The British government has said that two companies were considered strategically significant to the Kremlin. Now we move on to our next news. Chinese Foreign Ministry has reacted to the spy case being highlighted in the United Kingdom. The Chinese Foreign Ministry spokesperson Lin Jian has stated that the espionage case is being used as an excuse to slander or smear China. This development comes as the British government and the Crown Prosecution Service faces questions over dropping the spy case after a key witness has said in a statement that China was carrying out large-scale espionage against the British. However, China has rejected such claims. Let's listen into what Chinese Foreign Ministry spokesperson has said.
我们注意到有关情况，中方的立场很明确，我们坚决反对以所谓间谍活动为由，炒作、说事、污蔑、抹黑。
That's all we have time for. We will continue to bring you more news updates from around the world.